The blue marble called Earth spun slowly in the darkness of space, completely unaware that hundreds of eyes watched it from the void. These eyes belonged to ships that had hidden themselves beyond human detection for 300 years. The ships were massive, each one the size of a small city, and they carried beings from across the galaxy who called themselves the Galactic Confederation. Ambassador Kale stood on the bridge of the flagship, his silver skin gleaming under the soft lights. His people, the Vorthons, had been studying humans longer than any other species in the Confederation. What he had learned over the centuries filled him with deep worry. The creatures on that small planet below were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They learned too fast, Kale said to his aide, who was taking notes on a glowing tablet. In just 300 years, they went from using wooden ships to splitting atoms. Most species take thousands of years to make such progress. The aide nodded. Every member of the Confederation knew about humanity's strange ability to advance at incredible speed. It was not natural. It was dangerous. On Earth, Dr. Hyunwoo worked late in his laboratory in Seoul. The building was quiet except for the humming of machines and the clicking of keyboards. He had been working on quantum physics for 15 years, trying to understand the deepest secrets of how the universe worked. Tonight felt different. The numbers on his screen were showing something he had never seen before. Yoonji, come look at this, he called to his research partner. Yoonji walked over, her tired eyes focusing on the data. She had been working with Hyunwoo for 8 years and she knew when something was important. The readings on the screen made her heart race. These energy patterns, she whispered, they don't make sense. It's like something is watching our experiments and responding to them. Hyunwoo nodded. For months, their quantum experiments had been producing strange results. Every time they tried to measure certain particles, the measurements changed in ways that seemed almost intelligent. It was as if the universe itself was aware of their observations. We need to tell the others, Yoonji said. This could change everything we know about physics. Across the city, Jiho sat in a small room filled with radio equipment and computer screens. He worked for the government, listening to signals from space. Most of the time, he heard nothing but the random noise of stars and planets. But for the past 6 months, he had been detecting something else. The signals were very faint and came from far beyond Earth's solar system. They were not random. They had patterns that seemed to match human activities. When Earth launched satellites, the signals would change. When large cities used more electricity, the signals would respond. It was impossible, but Jiho was sure of what he was seeing. He picked up his phone and called So Young, a woman who studied alien languages at Seoul National University. Even though no alien languages had ever been found, So Young was one of the few people who might understand what Jiho had discovered. So Young, I need you to look at something, Jiho said when she answered. Can you come to my office tonight? It's important. So Young arrived an hour later. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who had spent her career studying how different species might communicate. When Jiho showed her the signal patterns, she became very quiet. These are not natural, she said after studying the data for an hour. Someone is sending these signals and they are watching us very carefully. Meanwhile, in the darkness of space, the Confederation Council was meeting. Representatives from dozens of alien species had gathered to discuss the human problem. The meeting was taking place on a station that was the size of a small moon, hidden behind Jupiter where Earth's telescopes could not see it. Kale stood before the council, his report ready. He had studied humans more than anyone else, and his words would decide humanity's fate. Honored representatives, Kale began. I have watched the humans for 3 centuries. In that time, they have gone from primitive animals to a species that is close to discovering faster than light travel. This cannot be allowed. A representative from the Zeloth Empire raised one of her forearms. But surely they are still young. Perhaps they can be guided to become peaceful, like other species. Cal shook his head. You do not understand. Humans are not like other species. They do not accept limits. When they face a wall, they do not go around it or turn back. They break through it. When they are told something is impossible, they find a way to make it possible. This is why they are dangerous. Another representative spoke up. What do you propose? Containment, Kyle said simply. We must trap them in their solar system before they develop the technology to travel to other stars. If they spread across the galaxy, they will change everything. They will not follow our rules or respect our boundaries. They will make their own rules. The council chamber became very quiet. Containment was an old practice that the Confederation had used before, but only on species that were truly dangerous. It meant trapping an entire species on their homeworlds using technology that created barriers in space itself. How long can we contain them? Asked a representative from the Kelvari collective. Forever, if necessary, Kyle replied. The barriers are stronger than anything they could possibly develop. They will live and die on their little planet and the galaxy will remain safe. Back on Earth, Hyunwoo and his team were getting closer to their breakthrough. They had no idea that their experiments were being watched by thousands of alien scientists, or that their success would trigger humanity's greatest challenge. As the Confederation Council voted to approve the containment protocol, ancient machines began to wake up throughout the solar system. These machines had been placed there long ago, waiting for the day when they would be needed. They were designed for one purpose: to build a prison around Earth that could never be broken. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would be contained. In his laboratory, Hyunwoo looked at his latest results and smiled. Tomorrow he would announce to the world that faster-than-light travel was possible. He had no way of knowing that tomorrow would never come for humanity's dreams of reaching the high stars. The trap was about to be sprung, and Earth's children would wake up to find themselves caged by forces they could not imagine. 5 years had passed since the day the sky changed forever. Humans called it the solar anomaly, though nobody really understood what had happened. One moment, Earth's space telescopes could see distant galaxies and faraway stars. The next moment, there was nothing beyond Pluto except a strange, shimmering wall that seemed to bend light itself. Minho stood in the control room of the International Space Research Center, staring at screens that showed the same impossible readings they had shown for 5 years. The wall surrounded Earth's entire solar system like a giant bubble, and nothing could pass through it. They had tried everything: nuclear missiles, laser beams, electromagnetic pulses, and even crashing spacecraft into it at incredible speeds. Nothing worked. Any changes today? Asked Yujin as she entered the control room. She was Minho's partner in trying to solve the greatest mystery in human history. Her engineering skills had helped design most of the tests they had performed on the barrier. Same as always, Minho replied, pointing to the data. It absorbs everything we throw at it and gives nothing back. It's like the universe just ends at the edge of our solar system. Yujin nodded sadly. She had been working on this problem for 3 years, ever since governments around the world had put together the best minds on Earth to figure out what had happened to them. The answer was always the same. They were trapped. In another part of the building, Taehyun was meeting with world leaders through video screens. As Earth's first director of interplanetary defense, he had been given the job of preparing humanity for whatever had caused the barrier. The job was harder than anyone had imagined. The Chinese have finished their new rocket tests, reported the president of Korea. Same result as everyone else. The barrier stops everything. What about the deep space radio signals? Asked the Prime Minister of Japan. Are we still trying to contact whoever did this? Taehyun looked tired. The stress of leading humanity's response to the crisis was wearing him down. Heewon's team is working on that, but we haven't received any answers to our messages. Heewon was in her office 3 floors below, surrounded by computers and charts that tracked every attempt to communicate through the barrier. As Earth's leading expert on strategic analysis, she had been studying the barrier's behavior for patterns that might give them clues about who had built it. It's not just keeping us in, she said to her assistant. Look at these readings from the Mars probe. When it tried to approach the barrier from the inside, the wall seemed to push it back gently. But when we fired missiles at it from Earth, the barrier absorbed them completely. It's treating us differently depending on what we do. Her assistant, a young man named Jun Seo, was one of the few people who understood Hyewon's complex theories. You think it's intelligent? I think it's designed to respond to different types of contact in different ways, Haiwan replied. Whoever built this thing wanted to keep us inside, but they also didn't want to hurt us unless we tried to break out violently. Junseo had his own research project in the basement of the building. As a quantum physicist, he had been studying how the barrier affected their experiments. What he had discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. Every time we run quantum experiments, he explained to his colleague Nari, the results seem to echo beyond the barrier. It's like our experiments are being copied or reflected by something on the other side. Nari, who monitored deep space communications, had noticed something similar. I've been tracking our radio signals for 2 years. Most of them bounce off the barrier and come back to us, but some of them seem to get through, and I'm detecting very faint responses. What kind of responses? Mathematical patterns, prime numbers, geometric shapes, basic physics equations. Someone out there is answering our signals, but they're being very careful about what they tell us. This information was passed up to Dong Hyun, who led the team of scientists working on the barrier problem. Dong Hyun was a careful man who had spent his whole career solving impossible problems. The barrier was the biggest challenge he had ever faced. We need to change our approach, he told his team during their weekly meeting. We've been trying to break through the barrier by force. That's not working. We need to understand it first. What are you thinking? Asked Minho. I'm thinking that whoever built this barrier has technology far beyond ours. They could have destroyed us completely, but they didn't. They just trapped us. That means they want us alive, but they don't want us to leave. The question is, why? Eugene had been thinking about the same question. Maybe they're afraid of us. The room became quiet. The idea that advanced aliens might fear humanity seemed impossible. Humans couldn't even leave their own solar system. How could they be a threat to beings who could build barriers around entire star systems? Think about it, Eugene continued. Before the barrier appeared, we were getting close to faster-than-light travel. Dr. Hyunwoo's team was about to announce their breakthrough. What if someone was watching us and decided we were advancing too quickly? Dong-hyun nodded slowly. It was a frightening thought, but it made sense. If that's true, then we're dealing with beings who see us as dangerous. The question is, what do we do about it? The answer to that question was beginning to form in the minds of Earth's best scientists. If they couldn't break through the barrier, maybe they could find a way around it. But first, they needed to understand exactly what they were dealing with. Woo Jin, a young researcher who had joined the project only 6 months ago, was working on a new theory. He believed that the barrier wasn't just a wall in space, but something that existed in multiple dimensions at the same time. If he was right, it might be possible to find a weakness. The barrier exists in our normal spacetime, he explained to Subin, his research partner. But the energy readings suggest it also extends into quantum space. If we could find a way to exist partially in quantum space ourselves, we might be able to pass through it. Subin looked worried. That sounds incredibly dangerous. We don't know what existing in quantum space would do to human beings. It might kill us, Woo Jin admitted. But staying trapped in here will definitely kill our civilization slowly. We're already seeing the effects. Birth rates are dropping. People are losing hope. If we don't find a way out soon, humanity will start to give up. He was right. Across Earth, people were struggling with the reality of being trapped forever in their own solar system. Some had started new religions that worshiped the barrier. Others had fallen into deep depression. A few had suggested that humanity should try to make contact with their captors and surrender. But in the laboratories and research centers around the world, the best minds of humanity were working on a different solution. They called it the Exodus Project, and it would either free humanity or destroy them in the attempt. The plan was simple in concept but nearly impossible to execute. If the barrier existed in multiple dimensions, then humans would have to learn to exist in multiple dimensions too. They would have to evolve beyond what they were and become something new. As Dong Hyun looked at the early plans for the project, he wondered if they were about to save humanity or lose it forever. But one thing was certain: they could not remain prisoners. It was not in human nature to accept cages, no matter how comfortable or secure they might be. The work began immediately, and with it, humanity took its first step toward a transformation that would change everything. 10 years had passed since the barrier first appeared, and humanity had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. The world's governments had united under a single purpose: breaking free from their cosmic prison. Every resource, every brilliant mind, every new technology was focused on the Exodus project. Wu Jin stood in front of the largest quantum computer ever built, its processors humming with calculations that would have been impossible just 5 years ago. Beside him, Subin monitored readouts that showed the barrier's deepest secrets. What they had discovered would either save humanity or doom them all. "The pattern is clear now," Wu Jin said, pointing to the data on the screen. "The barrier wasn't designed to keep humans from leaving. It was designed to keep normal space-traveling species from leaving. Whoever built this thing never imagined that a species would change itself to escape." Subin nodded, but her expression was worried. "The question is whether humans can survive the change we're talking about. What you're suggesting has never been tried before." Wu Jin's discovery had shaken the entire scientific community. The barrier worked by detecting the physical and energy signatures of spacecraft and living beings. When it found something trying to leave the solar system, it would absorb or redirect that energy back toward Earth. But the barrier had one weakness: it could only detect beings and objects that existed entirely in normal space-time. "If we can modify human biology to exist partially in quantum space," Wu Jin explained to the assembled scientists, "we would become invisible to the barrier's detection systems. We could walk right through it." Chan Wu, who led the biological research team, raised his hand. "The risks are enormous. We're talking about changing human DNA at the deepest level. We don't know what that would do to human consciousness, memory, or identity." "We know what staying here will do," replied Ye Jin, Chan Wu's partner in the biological research. "Humanity will slowly die in this cage. We've already seen the psychological effects. People are giving up hope. If we don't try this, we might not have a species left to save." The debate had been going on for months. Earth's population was divided between those who wanted to attempt the transformation and those who believed it was too dangerous. But the decision had already been made by the world's leaders. The first test subjects would undergo the procedure within the month. Kyung-ho, who commanded Earth's military forces, was preparing for what might come after the breakthrough. "If this works and we get through the barrier, we need to be ready for whatever is waiting for us on the other side," he told his officers. "The beings who trapped us here won't be happy to see us escape." Da Yun, who specialized in consciousness research, had been working on the most difficult part of the project, making sure human minds could survive existing in multiple dimensions at once. Her research had led to breakthroughs in understanding how human thoughts and memories were stored in the brain. "The good news is that human consciousness is more flexible than we thought," she reported to the project leaders. "The brain can adapt to processing information from multiple dimensions simultaneously. The bad news is that the process will be extremely painful and some people might not survive it." Despite the risks, volunteers had signed up from around the world. They understood that they might die in the attempt, but they also understood that humanity's future depended on someone being willing to take the risk. Sang Min was the first volunteer. He was a former astronaut who had always dreamed of traveling to the stars. When the barrier appeared, those dreams had been crushed. Now he had a chance to not just reach the stars, but to become something that could travel between them without any spacecraft at all. "I'm ready," he told the medical team as they prepared him for the procedure. Beside him, Hei In, a physicist who had also volunteered, was going through the same preparation. They had decided to undergo the transformation together, believing they would have a better chance of survival if they weren't alone. The procedure took place in a specially built chamber deep underground. The room was filled with quantum field generators that would slowly change the volunteers' cellular structure while keeping their consciousness intact. The process would take 72 hours, and there was no way to stop it once it began. Chan Wu and his team monitored every vital sign as Sang Min and Hai In lay unconscious in the transformation chambers. For the first 24 hours, everything seemed normal. Their brain activity was stable and their bodies were responding to the quantum fields as predicted. Then something unexpected happened. On the second day, both volunteers began to phase in and out of visible existence. Sometimes they were solid and clearly present. Other times they became transparent, like ghosts. The monitoring equipment could barely track them during these phases. They're existing in both normal space and quantum space simultaneously, Ye-Jin reported with amazement. Their consciousness is intact, but their physical forms are becoming something entirely new. On the third day, Sang-Min opened his eyes, but when he looked around the room, he could see things that weren't visible to normal human sight. He could see the quantum fields that filled the space, the energy patterns that flowed through the walls, and the barrier itself, which appeared to him as a massive web of light surrounding the solar system. "I can see it," he whispered, as the medical team gathered around him. "I can see the barrier, and I can see through it." Heian woke up a few hours later with the same abilities. Both volunteers reported that they felt completely human in their minds and personalities, but their bodies were different. They could choose to exist primarily in normal space, where they appeared solid and normal, or they could shift into quantum space, where they became invisible and could pass through solid matter. "Can you pass through the barrier?" asked Wu-Jin, hardly daring to hope. Sang-Min smiled. "I think so. The barrier can't detect us when we're in quantum space. To its sensors, we don't exist." The first test came a week later. Sang-Min, wearing a spacesuit designed for the new quantum humans, was launched toward the edge of the solar system in a specially modified spacecraft. As he approached the barrier, he shifted into quantum space and passed through it as if it were nothing more than empty air. For the first time in 10 years, a human being had left the solar system. But what Sang-Min found on the other side shocked everyone. "There are ships out here," he reported over the radio. "Thousands of them. They're just sitting in space watching our solar system." Jinwoo, who was monitoring the mission from Earth, felt his heart race. "Are they hostile?" "I don't think so," Sang-Min replied. "They seem surprised. I don't think they expected anyone to get through the barrier." As news of the successful breakthrough spread across Earth, preparations began for the next phase of the plan. Humanity would not just send scouts through the barrier. They would send an entire fleet of transformed humans to confront whoever had imprisoned them and demand their freedom. But first, they needed to transform thousands of volunteers and build ships that could carry quantum humans across the galaxy. The breakthrough had been achieved, but the real challenge was just beginning. The beings who had trapped humanity were about to learn that humans, when caged, don't just find ways to escape. They find ways to make sure they can never be caged again. As more volunteers underwent the transformation, Earth's population began to change in ways that would have been unimaginable just months before. Humanity was evolving, and that evolution would soon reshape the entire galaxy. The prison had been broken, but the prisoners who emerged were no longer the same species that had been trapped. They were something new, something powerful, and something that the galaxy had never seen before. The first wave of transformed humans emerged from Earth's atmosphere in ships that looked nothing like the spacecraft of the past. These vessels were designed for beings who could exist in multiple dimensions at once, with hulls that could phase between solid matter and quantum energy. Leading the fleet was Seok-Jin, one of the first military officers to undergo the transformation. Beside him on the command bridge, Mi-young studied the sensor readings that showed what awaited them beyond the barrier. The alien fleet was massive, beyond anything they had imagined. Ships the size of cities floated in perfect formations, their dark hulls reflecting no light. There were thousands of them, representing dozens of different alien species. "They've been waiting for us," Mi-young said quietly. "All these years they've been sitting out here watching our prison." Seok-Jin nodded grimly. The human fleet was small compared to what faced them, but they had advantages the aliens couldn't understand. As they approached the barrier, the human ships began to shift into quantum space, becoming invisible to most sensors while remaining visible to each other. "All ships prepare to phase through the barrier," Seok-Jin commanded. "Stay in quantum mode until we're in formation on the other side." One by one, the human ships passed through the barrier as if it were made of air. The sight of their emergence sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. Emergency signals flashed between the alien vessels in languages that human computers had never encountered. Young Ho, who served as humanity's first quantum-enhanced diplomat, was aboard the lead ship. His transformation had given him abilities that went beyond physical changes. He could sense electromagnetic patterns and energy flows in ways that allowed him to detect emotions and intentions from alien technology. "They're afraid," he reported to Seok Jin. "I can feel it in their communications. They didn't expect this. They thought the barrier was unbreakable." The alien fleet began to move, but not in an attack formation. Instead, they were pulling back, creating distance between themselves and the human ships. It was the behavior of beings who had encountered something they couldn't understand or control. Insu, the fleet's chief technology analyst, was scanning the alien vessels with equipment designed for quantum-enhanced perception. What he discovered with his partner Sun Hee changed everything they thought they knew about their captors. "Their technology is incredibly advanced," Insu reported, "but it's all based on working within the laws of physics as they understand them. Look at these scans, Sun Hee. Every alien ship uses the same basic principles of space travel, energy, generation, and material science. They're all following the same rules." Sun Hee studied the data with growing amazement. It's like they've reached the limits of what they think is possible and stopped there. They've built their entire civilization around the idea that certain things can't be done. "And we just did one of those impossible things," Insu concluded. Meanwhile, Byung-ho was leading a small reconnaissance team on a mission to get closer to the alien fleet. With him was Yoon-young, a former intelligence officer whose transformation had enhanced her ability to process multiple streams of information simultaneously. As their ship moved through quantum space toward the alien vessels, they detected something unexpected. Data transmissions that were being broadcast openly between the alien ships. The aliens weren't trying to hide their communications, probably because they had never encountered a species that could intercept them. "Can you decode any of this?" Byung-ho asked Yoon-young as streams of alien data flowed across their screens. "Some of it," she replied, her enhanced mind processing the patterns faster than any normal human could have managed. "It's not language as we understand it. It's more like shared database access. They're updating each other with information from their central records." What Yoon-young discovered in those records horrified the human fleet. The aliens had detailed files on hundreds of species that had been contained within barriers just like the one around Earth. Most of those species had simply accepted their imprisonment and lived out their lives on their home worlds until they eventually died out. "They've done this before," Yoon-young reported back to the fleet. "Many times. They find species that are advancing too quickly, trap them in their home systems, and wait for them to give up and fade away." "How many species?" asked Seok Jin. "At least 200 that I can identify from the data fragments, maybe more, and we're the first ones to ever break out." The weight of that revelation settled over the human fleet. They weren't just fighting for their own freedom. They were potentially the only hope for justice for hundreds of extinct civilizations. Jae-woo, who was monitoring the alien fleet's movements with his partner Seo Jin, noticed something strange happening among the alien ships. Some of the vessels were breaking formation and moving away from the main fleet at high speed. "Where are they going?" Seo Jin wondered aloud. The answer came from intercepted communications that Yoon-young managed to partially decode. The fleeing ships were carrying emergency messages to their homeworlds, warning their governments about what humanity had become. "They're not just afraid of us," Jae-woo realized. "They're afraid of what we represent. We've broken their fundamental understanding of what's possible. If humans can transform themselves to escape containment, what else might we be capable of?" As the human fleet maintained its position outside the barrier, more alien ships continued to arrive. But instead of preparing for battle, they were organizing what looked like a massive retreat. Entire sections of the fleet were jumping to faster-than-light travel and disappearing into deep space. Young-ho attempted to establish communication with the remaining alien vessels, but the responses he received were not words or images. Instead, the aliens sent mathematical equations and physical constants, as if they were trying to remind the humans of the natural laws that were supposed to limit all intelligent life. "They're trying to tell us that what we've done is impossible," Young-ho reported. They keep sending us the same information about quantum mechanics and space-time physics, as if they think we don't understand the rules we've broken. It was then that the true message became clear to the human commanders. The aliens had not imprisoned humanity out of hatred or a desire for conquest. They had done it out of fear of chaos. Their entire galactic civilization was built on the principle that there were certain boundaries that could not be crossed, certain laws that could not be broken. Humanity had just shattered that worldview by refusing to accept limitations that the aliens considered absolute. The wordless message flowing between the alien ships was a mixture of terror and incomprehension. They were witnessing the emergence of something that challenged the very foundations of their understanding of reality. They trapped us because they couldn't imagine that a species would transform itself rather than accept imprisonment, Mi-young said as she watched more alien ships flee into the darkness. To them, evolution has limits, growth has boundaries, progress eventually stops. But not for humans, Seok-jin replied grimly. The alien fleet that had watched Earth for 10 years was dissolving before their eyes. Some ships were retreating to distant systems, others were sending increasingly frantic messages to their homeworlds, and a few were simply shutting down their engines and drifting in space, as if their crews had given up trying to understand what they were witnessing. Humanity had won its freedom, but the victory felt hollow. They had not conquered an enemy in battle or negotiated their release through diplomacy. Instead, they had terrified their captors into fleeing by becoming something that didn't fit into the aliens' conception of how the universe was supposed to work. As the human fleet prepared to explore the galaxy that had been denied to them for so long, they carried with them the knowledge that their greatest strength might also be their greatest curse. They had proven that humans would rather become something unknowable than accept defeat, but in doing so, they had made themselves into something that the rest of the galaxy might never be able to understand or accept. The galaxy was vast and empty in ways that humanity had never imagined. Ho-jin and Yuri moved through the ruins of what had once been the homeworld of the Telvanni Empire, one of the founding members of the Galactic Confederation. The cities were intact but completely abandoned, as if an entire civilization had simply packed up and left overnight. They evacuated everything, Yuri said, as she examined the empty buildings with her quantum-enhanced senses. 20 billion people lived here just 6 months ago. Now there's nothing but empty shells. Ho-jin phased through a wall to examine the inside of what appeared to be a government building. The computers were still running, but all the data had been wiped clean. They didn't just leave, they erased all traces of where they went. This was the third abandoned world they had found in just 2 weeks of exploration. Word of humanity's escape from the barrier had spread through the galaxy faster than the human fleet could travel. Entire civilizations were fleeing deeper into space, abandoning star systems they had occupied for thousands of years rather than risk contact with the transformed humans. Back on the command ship, Seung-ho studied reports from dozens of exploration teams with a heavy heart. As Earth's transformed leader, he had hoped that humanity's freedom would lead to contact with other intelligent species, trade, and cultural exchange. Instead, they had found a galaxy in panic. How many worlds have we found abandoned now? He asked Ji-yoon, who was coordinating the exploration missions. 47 confirmed, with reports of more every day, she replied. The pattern is the same everywhere. Complete evacuation within days of receiving news about our breakthrough. They're not just avoiding us, Seung-ho. They're fleeing from the very idea of what we represent. Ji-yoon had undergone her transformation only 3 months ago, and she was still learning to control her new abilities. Like all quantum-enhanced humans, she could perceive energy patterns and information flows that were invisible to normal senses. What she had been seeing in the abandoned alien cities troubled her deeply. There are traces of psychological trauma in the energy patterns they left behind, she told Seung-ho. These aren't the signatures of people who made calm, rational decisions to relocate. These are the patterns of beings who fled in terror. Gwang-ho and Bo-young were working on a different aspect of the problem. As the fleet's leading scientists, they had been studying the quantum transformation process and its long-term effects on human biology and consciousness. What they had discovered would force humanity to make the most difficult decision in their history. The transformation is still progressing, Guang Ho reported to the senior staff. None of us are the same as we were when we first underwent the procedure. We're continuing to evolve and the process appears to be irreversible. Bo Young displayed her research on the main screen. Look at these brain scans from volunteers who transformed a year ago compared to those who transformed last month. The quantum integration is deeper in the earlier subjects. They can phase between dimensions more easily. They can perceive more types of energy. And their consciousness can process information at rates that are increasing exponentially. What does that mean for us? Asked Sheng Ho. Though he suspected, he already knew the answer. It means we can't go back, Guang Ho said simply. Even if we wanted to return to normal human biology, the process has gone too far. We're becoming something that has never existed before, and we don't know what we'll become in the end. The implications were staggering. Humanity had saved itself from imprisonment, but the price was their humanity itself. They were becoming beings of pure consciousness that could exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously, but they were losing their connection to the physical universe that had given birth to them. Dongwu and Haya Jin were exploring the galactic core when they made a discovery that put everything into perspective. Hidden in a region of space that was barely accessible to normal matter, they found the ruins of an ancient civilization that had undergone a transformation similar to humanity's. The structures are made of crystallized quantum energy, He-Jin reported as they examined the alien ruins. This entire complex exists primarily in quantum space. Only beings like us could even see it. Dongwu was studying inscriptions that had been carved into the quantum crystal walls. The writing was unlike anything in the alien databases they had captured, but his enhanced consciousness could interpret the basic meaning through pattern recognition. It's a warning, he said quietly. This species called themselves the predecessors. They underwent quantum transformation to escape some kind of cosmic threat millions of years ago, but listen to what they left behind. He transmitted his translation to the fleet. We became infinite and lost everything. We can touch all realities but belong to none. We are gods without purpose, consciousness without form. Do not follow our path, for transcendence is the cruelest prison of all. The message continued with technical details about how the predecessors had gradually lost the ability to interact with normal matter and energy. They had become beings of pure thought and possibility, but they could no longer affect the physical universe in any meaningful way. They had transcended the limitations of biology only to discover that those limitations were what gave existence meaning. Eventually, they faded away completely, Dongwu continued reading. Not through death, but through a kind of existential dissolution. They became so expanded in consciousness that they could no longer maintain individual identity. They merged with the quantum field itself and ceased to exist as separate beings. The implications hit the human fleet like a physical blow. They had escaped their cage by becoming something beyond normal existence, but they were heading toward a future where they would become so transcendent that they would lose all connection to the universe they had fought to explore. Minwu and Su-Jin stood on the bridge of humanity's first quantum ship, watching as the last of the alien monitoring stations fled from their approach. The galaxy stretched out before them, vast and empty and terrifying in its loneliness. We won, Su-Jin said quietly. We broke free of the cage and proved that humans can overcome any barrier. So why does it feel like we've lost everything? Minwu had been thinking about that question for months. As one of the first humans to complete the transformation, he had watched his enhanced abilities grow stronger every day. He could now exist in 7 dimensions simultaneously and process information at rates that would have seemed godlike to his former self. But with each expansion of his consciousness, he felt himself becoming more distant from the human experience that had shaped him. Because we saved humanity by ceasing to be human, he replied. We chose transcendence over extinction, but transcendence comes with its own price. The fleet had a choice to make. They could continue their transformation and eventually become beings of pure consciousness like the predecessors, gaining infinite knowledge and power but losing their connection to physical existence. Or they could find a way to halt their evolution and remain forever changed but still recognizably human. Either path would mean accepting limitations. If they continued transforming, they would be limited by the ultimate loneliness of transcendence. If they stopped the process, they would be limited by their current hybrid nature, forever existing between dimensions, but never fully belonging to either. As Earth's transformed children spread across the galaxy, they carried with them the knowledge that their greatest victory had come at the greatest possible cost. They had proven that humans would rather become something unknowable than accept defeat, but in doing so, they had discovered that some cages are harder to escape than others. The Galactic Confederation had made their greatest mistake by underestimating humanity's refusal to accept limitations, but humanity had made their own mistake by believing that freedom could be achieved without sacrifice. They had broken every barrier and transcended every limitation, only to discover that the final prison was the one they had built for themselves. In the end, their wordless departure from normal existence marked not just humanity's victory over their captors, but their first step into a cosmos where they might be the only beings capable of transcending the fundamental laws that bound all other life. They had become the masters of reality itself, but they had paid for that mastery with their souls. As the last alien ship disappeared into the darkness, humanity found itself alone in a galaxy they had fought so hard to explore, carrying the burden of infinite possibility and the curse of eternal isolation.